We have a great little panel today about content marketing. It is definitely on the rise. It's definitely a topic that people are talking about. And I'm just going to kick it right off by asking Susan Gates of Mind Over Media why this is the time that brands want to become publishers, that small businesses, large businesses, multinationals, everybody wants to become a publisher of content. Everybody wants to be doing more serious content, less advertising, more storytelling. And I'm wondering if you could tell us why is this happening right now, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you've come across working with brands? And before you answer that, please just tell the audience very briefly what you do with content and who you've worked for.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm Susan Gates, and I have a company called Mind Over Media, and we used to be what is known as a custom publishing company. We made magazines for brands, and we've been around since 1996, and a lot has happened since then, right, on the media landscape, right? So now we're still making magazines, but I would say 85% of the publishing work we do for brands is digital. And basically what we do is we help brands to become publishers in a digital age. I started my career back when in New York, which was on the far side of what really has become a tectonic shift in the digital landscape. Back in the day where media and advertising was what you'd call push advertising to consumers, pushing out messages, buy this, do that. On account of mobile, social, the internet, the entire landscape has changed. And now what we're talking about is no longer push marketing, but it really is all about pull. This push and pull, and some of the language that I'm going to be using here comes from a great friend and colleague of mine. His name is Mark Bonchek. If you Google his name, or if you search on Harvard Business Review, you can read some really terrific posts about this sort of media landscape history and shift. What's going on now is a huge change. You can kind of look back 500 years when Gutenberg invented the printing press, and that's really the last time that a change this significant has taken place. You know, pre-Gutenberg, monks, handwriting, manuscripts that were passed by hand from people to people, and then the printing press came, and suddenly it's mass communication. Well, now we are moving from mass communication to mass collaboration. It's really not about telling the audience what it's all about. Instead, publishing and brand publishing is about pulling communities together and helping them to communicate with one another. It's a great opportunity for brands to stop, really listen to their consumers, and really learn about what their consumers are interested in, care about, are passionate about. And what it all comes down to is, for brands, it's an opportunity because brands really need to think about shared purpose, is what we call it. What is it that the brand really cares about that their consumer also really cares about on a deep level, on an important level? A great example of this would be, for example, Nike. I'm sure you're familiar with Nike Fuel and all the kind of terrific digital content that they're sharing with their community. Nike's brand mission is to help, is to inspire and really lift athletes to the next level of experience. And they really consider, anyone that has a body, they say, is an athlete. So versus Adidas, whose mission is to make great running shoes. So Nike's mission is really shared. It's something where they want to help the audience become inspired and become better at what they do. Adidas's is their own purpose, make better shoes. Nike, if a brand really can identify a shared purpose with their audience, that really is the seed of what all the content can become about. so that it's no longer brand pushing messaging to audience, but it's brand sharing messaging with audience, and audience or consumers sharing amongst themselves. And the brand therefore sort of creates an orbit, sort of gravity. You're pulling more and more consumers their way in this really intrinsically valuable world of shared content and shared purpose.
I like this idea of sort of a shared purpose with your customers, and I wanted to put that to Dustin as well, working at Dun & Bradstreet Credibility Corp right here in LA. Obviously, Dun & Bradstreet has a big brand recognition, a huge customer base with small businesses. Does this square with you, Susan's idea of finding a shared purpose, a shared mission with customers, and if so, how are you guys doing that? What are you doing to become a resource more than just a maker of tennis shoes, essentially?
Well, sure. No, Susan is definitely right on point there in terms of the way that brands need to look at it. You know, we can, without a doubt, improve upon what we do. But this past year, we have one campaign that I think at least helps exemplify how we approached it. And a good example is that we took on this initiative to say we want to kind of be thought leaders in this access to capital space. So what does it take for small businesses to understand the kind of capital they need to grow their business, to improve their business, and what's really appropriate for them and whatnot. So we put these events on around the country where we bring in traditional funders and alternative funders and crowdfunders, bring in venture capitalists, all different types of funding opportunities, educate small business owners on that, and then help guide them and meet them with other people. But by having that as a core and knowing that this past 2013 was really about access to capital and our ability to help educate small business owners, we've been able to create a lot of content around that topic as well. So we've gone out and we have a website, so we bought the domain accesstocapital.com, and we've created an incredible amount of content by bringing other experts in, some of the speakers who've come to our events around the country, by bringing in other panels members or other people who've been experts with some of the co-sponsors we have, those kinds of things. So really, it's just one example, but I think that most brands can kind of find a way to almost get above your own, when I say give you your own story, and really try to have a shared story with the people you want to reach. And so this past year, it's been an awesome campaign for us to take on this concept of access to capital, and hopefully that gives you, one insight into a way we approached it.
Sort of along a similar vein, something that Susan was talking about, that the idea of content and brands has evolved from magazines into a much more digital, much more collaborative effort. I wanted to ask Antonio a question about this. So you work at the LA Times, helping brands creating content on behalf of brands, putting together packages for them. And eByline, obviously we work with media. We've been in the media for a while, we have a shared newsroom background. Newspapers, magazines, media companies in general have been doing sponsored content to some extent forever. Advertorials, special sections, event opportunities, all sorts of different stuff. Now that things are moving, as Susan said, much more online, much more digital, much more collaborative, I wanted to know what you think the media's role is in that. I know the media is evolving to try and take advantage of their brand recognition, their role as sort of arbiters of taste and arbiters of what good content is. How's the LA Times evolving along with this, and what do they do for brands in terms of content strategy, in terms of ideas and brand recognition?
So I head up the brand publishing division over at the Los Angeles Times, which is a division that operates separately from the newsroom, and that's something that is unique when it comes to publishers who have their own platform, newspapers and magazines, is that there is definitely a delineation between the business side and the newsroom or editorial. The newsroom at the Los Angeles Times, its mission is along the lines of providing a community service and upholding editorial integrity. So on the business side, when it comes to working hand in hand with advertisers and brands, we're using resources that are separate from the newsroom. and particularly when it comes to leveraging partnerships along the lines of content for some of the brands that advertise with us. There is a section at the website that is clearly defined and labeled as sponsored content or advertorial, so that there isn't any confusion for the readers who are coming to the Los Angeles Times looking for editorial integrity and information that is accurate and top-notch. So what we have to offer, what the publisher brings to the table when it comes to working with these brands along the lines of sponsored content is audience, being able to scale that audience, and credibility, which is something that's coming out of the newsroom, but the brand overall has a credibility factor to it that on the business side we're able to leverage when it comes to working with the brands and coming up with unique and custom content programs. For example, about a year ago, we worked with a premium vodka company, Kettle One, who was looking to reach out and achieve engagement at a deeper level with a very specific demo. They're looking for male Hispanics, 25 to 35, whose behavioral their behavioral was high, indexing high in consuming entertainment material. So we worked with them very closely, the folks over at Kettle One, to come up with a series of feature stories that ran as part of a sponsored content program at latimes.com, where we highlighted and interviewed a number of high-profile personalities and upcoming personalities in, say, I think it was the LA Galaxy, a few actors who were at the time up and coming, but have now achieved a little bit more in their area of film and TV, as well as up and coming chefs. So it's really that sort of ability to scale our audience that is something that the publishers bring to the table.
Could they? I'm just curious. Could they have done this on their own? I mean, a lot of brands, they have experience publishing some content, but the idea of going out and doing interviews, creating something that looks like journalism, even though it's separate from the newsroom. What specifically were they? Where did their sort of input end? The vodka companies end, and where did your sort of creative newsroom within a newsroom begin?
What the brand publishing team brings to the table is this sort of ability to leverage the credibility that comes along with working with the LA Times. I would say that's something that was part of the mix there, as well as having the resources on board where we could reach out to freelance writers who come to the table with all of these contacts in this specific area. So, audience is coming to the Los Angeles Times looking for, what's latest, what's new, what's happening.
The idea of keeping journalism separate from sponsored content, native advertising, all the different terms that we hear, and you edited some very, very major magazines. You've also worked on the corporate side. Do you see a blurring of those lines? Is that we sort of hear an outcry from journalists sometimes that these lines are being blurred. A lot of new media companies, a lot of digital media companies seem much more comfortable with blurring the lines, at least when it comes to sort of creative ideation, production of the content. Where do you see that going? Is this a controversial thing, or should we not really be that worried?
We should be very worried.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's highly controversial.
Yeah, we should be worried. Well, we should just be paying attention. I'm originally a journalist. I'm a journalist at heart. And what's so crucial in all of this, whether we're talking about journalism over on this side or whether we're talking about brand publishing on this, what it's all about is trust. It's really about the community, the consumer, trusting your messaging. And a big piece of trust is, where is this coming from? And I think it's utterly essential that brand publishers, number one, as I was saying earlier, really understand their audience, or their community, better put, that they really understand what their community wants and cares about and is going to be of value to them, and that they convey that and share that in an open way, so that the consumer, the reader, never is questioning ulterior motives. Where is this coming from? Trust is really the linchpin in all of this. So, for example, as Antonio is saying, sometimes they run branded content in the LA Times, but at all times, I'm sure, knowing people at the LA Times as I do, it's always really clearly marked as this is the brand's message. This is coming from the brand. The whole point in that as well is it's going to be good content, and the brand wants to reap the benefits of that value, that quality messaging. So it's very important to keep it really separate.
So trust is an issue that comes up frequently when brands talk about content. Another one that comes up that I really was hoping you could shed some light on is resources. Dun & Bradstreet has huge brand recognition. LA Times is working with multinational vodka companies and all sorts of big brands, but a lot of startups, a lot of smaller firms don't start off with a huge customer base of millions of people, don't start off with 2 million Facebook fans, and look at content and ask, where do I get the most bang for the buck? Should I be investing heavily in producing great content? Should I be investing heavily in promoting that content? And to some extent, they have to make some hard choices. Where do you think smaller companies without sort of unlimited marketing resources should be investing, should be focusing their energy, and what kind of smart decisions can they make there?
Good. I love this question. So many small and mid-sized companies come to us with this question. What do we do? And most of them are in a semi-panic. I mean, there's so much going on. There's so much social media, so many platforms. What do? We got to hurry up. We got to get on all of them. We got to just dump content out there all over the place fast. Hurry, hurry, hurry.
And every few weeks there's a new platform. Right?
Every few weeks
there's
every other
Instagram.
day there's something's changing, right? Or coming onto the scene. So what really I like to tell them is a really good place to start is to stop. Just stop. And really think about who is your audience, who are your consumers, what do they care about, what's going to be of value to them, where do you find them, and come up with a really solid, resonant place to begin. Pick one platform, pick one area of content that really is going to matter to your audience, and then go in and do that, and only that, but do it really, really well. An example of this kind of thing is a current client of ours. They're called Paul Davis Restoration, and what they do is they go in and help homeowners repair their homes after natural disasters, earthquakes, fires, floods, what have you. So they were trying to figure out, we don't have any content, we don't know what are we going to say, how are we going to do it? We created for them one infographic. It was really beautiful and really informative, and it was about how to prepare your home in case of a fire. And it takes the consumer through 20 steps of what to do with your home. And then we help them distribute that one infographic out to insurance agents across the country. Next thing that happened, since it was a really quality piece of content, is these agents are sharing it with their customers. Their customers are sharing it with each other, and all of this was done off of a Facebook page platform. And they were pulling customers in. People were coming in and loving this one infographic, which was branded Paul Davis Restoration. And that really was the kickoff point for an enormously powerful social media campaign that still is going on. It just grew from there. So it really is about don't go everywhere with everything fast, hurry. Stop, think about it. Where's just the right place to start, and start it in a really quality way, and things will catch on. The consumer will engage and pass the content back forth to one another. Doesn't cost that much.
It can cost that much, right? Some of your clients.
The fact that it's digital and not print helps quite a bit in
Right,
terms of budget.
Du-
So.
Dustin, how do you guys do this sort of content strategy? I'm curious how Dun & Bradstreet takes a simple idea such as Susan just described, and concepts start small on a whiteboard, but can become very large by the time you get to publication, distribution, promotion, and you involve multiple teams. I was wondering if you could just walk us through maybe an example of how you've done this access to capital, taken that idea and where ideas come from, how they make it out into the world as published products.
Sure. So I should also start and say, I know that's kind of come up a few times, we're actually not Dun & Bradstreet proper. And so I just want to be clear, we're Dun & Bradstreet Credibility Corp, and the nuance is simply that we bought and operate Dun & Bradstreet's small business division. But I got to be clear for my own purposes.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
I remember that too.
That's all good. So in terms of so we are actually a startup, believe it or not, based in Malibu. We just are. We happen to come with an incredible brand that has wonderful recognition. My background is actually, before I started working with Dun & Bradstreet Credibility Corp, was doing consulting and developing these, what I would used to call buzz building campaigns, or how do you go out there and build campaigns. And so similar to kind of where Susan's going here is, I don't like to just think like when somebody comes, oh, there's a new tool, there's Pinterest, or how do we do this? I don't think of marketing and social media in terms of tools. I much rather get back and say, what's the campaign? What are we really going to try to accomplish? And we've done campaigns around an infographic. We had a Demystifying the Duns campaign that was a really fun one we ran this year, where we just said, okay, what do we have to do to make that a success? And so you build one piece of, in that case, it was one piece of quality content, an infographic, and then we just make sure that probably the key for us is that everybody's in alignment and everybody is getting behind him, and really all the right players are at the table internally, especially when we start. So we'll work with our email newsletter teams. We'll work with our SEO and SEM teams. We'll work with our biz dev teams and make sure that we're reaching out to the right people there who might be able to help share our content. We'll reach out in our product teams and make sure it's on our website in the appropriate places. So a lot of my experience in terms of finding a campaign and making it successful is coming up with something that you are listening to your customers. This is something through experience they're going to find valuable. Develop a real well-defined campaign. This is what we're going to launch with, and this is what we're going to go, and this is how we're going to get everybody even internally excited so that they want to share it and be part of something they know is going to go big. Those type of strategies work the best in my experience. And I say this now working, we are a startup, but we're not one of the smaller startups around. We've grown quite substantially. So we're a large startup, and we do have a lot of resources. We've got a decent marketing team, but I've worked with others where you still can muster the resources of 2 or 3 people and really make a huge impact. As long as if you're really thinking, how do I use all of my resources appropriately on this campaign?
It also sounds like you're still very focused on the idea of the campaign, on the idea of sort of a limited time, a limited run. Does that sort of inform how you guys do content? I mean, many firms, as Susan said, it's sort of the fire hose. It never ends. It's many platforms. We always have to do more and more and more. Do you guys still view it as sort of, well, this is a discrete campaign or a discrete sort of content idea that we're going to tackle now, and then here's another one, and what does that do for you guys?
So there's some things that you just always have to be doing when you're running in our situation. So we've got ongoing campaigns, I call them, and I try to minimize those as much as I can. But there are certain customer service things. We've got ongoing, make sure we're checking Twitter on a regular basis. Are people talking about us or our products? Are we responding in an appropriate way? So there are some ongoing things, but I get burned out on those personally, and I know my team does as well. So we use a task management tool internally for our team, and it's campaign based, and we're going to do this, and there's certain things we know we're going to do in December. December for us is going to be the month of helping small businesses plan for 2014, and how do we'll tie it back to some of our own stuff, which in our case in Dun & Bradstreet Credibility Corp, you want to make sure as a small business owner that your file is all up to date and that you're ready for the next year. But for the most part, we're just going to have a campaign in December that's going to be lots of experts in the small business community, what do they recommend businesses do to get ready for the next year and really have a solid 2014? So that's already planned. It's nice, it's well defined, it's December, it's appropriate for the time of year, and it's something that, you know, my whole team can get behind, and even teams that are outside of my team at the company. We can get our email people behind it, we can get our PR team behind it, and our email and our biz dev, and everybody knows, okay, that's what you guys are gonna take on in December. Here's how we can support you doing that.
I like the idea of avoiding burnout. That's a content problem, I think. We have a couple minutes left. I wanted to touch on something that we haven't touched on, but that every business really cares about when it comes to content, which is ROI, and how to judge the return on investment of any marketing endeavor, but content in particular. And I want to put this to Antonio first, and then let anybody jump in after him to finish us off. But coming from the LA Times, a traditional media brand that to some extent, places like the LA Times invented the idea of ROI for marketing, of measuring reach, measuring brand recognition, understanding what you get for what you're spending, and companies have certainly become very, very familiar with click-through rates and pay-per-click, and the shift to digital has to some extent solidified the idea of quantifiable ROI at every stage. But content is a creative thing, and maybe doesn't lend itself so easily. So I want to ask you, when the LA Times works with brands, how are you helping them define the ROI of doing content beyond simple clicks and page views? What kind of questions do they ask, and what are the answers that you give them?
Yeah, it's definitely an education process, and it's both ways. Marketers, they love them some numbers. They're still asking for them. But one of the unique positions that a publisher like the Los Angeles Times has is that most advertisers are buying packages. So it's sort of a game of diversifying the different components that go into their buy, where a content program would be part of it. They're possibly also sponsoring an LA Times event, but they also are, running tons of media banners on the site. So it's a tricky conversation, and I think that one of the ways in which the company seems to be sort of tending at the moment is by including multi-platform media opportunities for advertisers to buy into, which kind of opens the conversation to, well, we're going to be looking at more than just impressions and PVs, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a qualitative engagement level that we're going to want to look at. We're going to want to look at the social media, the likes, then the video views, et cetera. It's definitely it's sort of more about the journey maybe, and less the destination.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And we're out of time, but I wanted to give both Dustin and Susan a chance to just give us your last word on the idea of ROI and content. Maybe if you could sum it up in a sentence or two. Dustin, how do you view figuring out the ROI of investing in content?
It's a great question. I'm fortunate that our executive team, where I'm at, gets this idea of really wanting to understand the importance of thought leadership, where it doesn't always tie directly back to an ROI. So we get some relationships with other banks or relationships with other entities out there that drive really good deals that aren't always measurable ROI by traditional standards. And although I'm very conscious of my team of trying to always recognize every chance we can when we can get some ROI. So if I can throw a special tag on a link that somebody's clicking on and they buy the product and now my team gets credit for it, I do that every time I can. And it helps me demonstrate our value, but I'm also lucky that we aren't having to show a huge ROI, on everything, because there are some elements of content that go above and beyond that really easy to measure analytics. As I say, it doesn't discount the importance of it, and there's lots of people in our company who pay a lot of attention to ROI. But I'm in a fortunate spot where, especially on the social media and the content, the blogs, and a lot of that other content we're creating, it's not ROI driven at its base.
Susan, you want to give us the last word?
Yeah, there's the way that we look at it is that there is enormous return to our brands, to our clients, in four buckets really. And this is what it's great because it's so different than traditional advertising. There's so much more value that is given. The first level is brand profile. and brand respect. It's just overall awareness. The second level is about growing the market, growing the audience, growing the community. For example, we've been for the last 3 years doing content for Cherokee and Dickies, who are the largest manufacturer of medical scrubs, and have grown an audience for them of 3 million nurses. There are 5.2 million registered nurses out there. So really they have, orbiting around their brand now, 3 million nurses. So it's those numbers that really are very valuable. They can market to these nurses like this. The fourth bucket is, of course, data. There's enormous data that comes in from this audience engagement that the brand can use to develop products against, to learn how to better market against, and so on. And then finally is the hardcore ROI, the actual transactions, the clicks and the transactions that are driven through the content. And all of those really need to be looked at as a whole. And we really do roll up our sleeves and we look at the analytics and we look at the numbers, but we also take other measurements that go beyond that fourth bucket, that pure kind of click transaction bucket.
All right, thank you very much. We are out of time, but I want to thank Susan Gates of Mind Over Media, Dustin Luther of Dun & Bradstreet Credibility Corp., and Antonio Cuevas of LA Times Brand Publishing. I'm Peter Beller, Director of Content at eByline. Thank you so much for joining us.